I think what's always been interesting for me with influencers, and I think what brands have sometimes struggled with, is that it's hard to retain that consistency, that visual language, when you then sort of give yourself over to a content creator who has their own visual language and and it's not an advertising space.
Hi, welcome back to Overherd on Social by The Go Agency, the podcast for people who want a mix of social media trends, marketing tips, influencer news, pop culture, and interesting chats with interesting people, but without taking things too seriously. I'm Jo, I'm here with my co-host Matthew Wyatt. Matt, we always like to start every episode with a bit of a fun fact, so Can you give us one?
This is quite random, but in 2005, a student from the UK created a website called the $1 Million Homepage. Have you heard of it?
No.
Okay. He sold each pixel for $1 as advertising space, and it went viral, sold out in under a year, and made him a millionaire.
Wow.
Pretty cool.
Well, great. And today we're sitting down with James Caig, strategy partner at WPP Media, and Hannah Ryan, global VP of campaign delivery at GOAT, to explore some of the big challenges that are facing advertisers right now and how creator marketing can be used to reach increasingly fragmented audiences. James, do you want to kick off with telling us a bit about your background, who you are, your career so far?
Okay, I've been a media and communication strategist for about 20 years. I've worked in media agencies, but I've also worked in creative and digital agencies. And a lot of my work in that time has been on government accounts. So really focused on behaviour change into teaching or helping people live more healthier lives, fulfil healthier behaviours, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's kind of my background.
Yeah, great. And Hannah?
So I'm Hannah. I've been in the influencer industry for actually 8 years this month. And I started at GOAT when we were very small, around 30 people. At the start, I focused on influencer relationships. So basically building those relationships with different creators, talent agents in the influencer world. And now I head up the delivery department at GOAT, focusing on organic, paid social, and production.
Great. What a career trajectory. Well, something as well we always like to ask people is, both in marketing, but very kind of different spaces. What did you want to do when you were little, and does it connect in any way?
I'm not sure about maybe not little, but by the time I was a teenager, all I wanted to do was be a music journalist. All I wanted to do was write for the NME. I don't know if any of you are old enough to know what the NME was, but it was a weekly newspaper, and so it connects in a way that I still love music and I still use music in sort of lots of my sort of thinking for work. But writing is also writing as a form of thinking, I suppose, I sort of use quite a bit. So I've carried on writing non-fiction. And I think as a strategist, I find that it's incredibly useful, very complementary to thinking in order, thinking about cause and effect, all that sort of stuff, and telling a story and convincing people, using words to sort of, conjure a picture without getting too self-important about it. That's what I'd say the kind of connection probably is. That makes me feel better about not having gone down that path now.
But you look like a guitar player to me.
Really?
I don't know. I could imagine you with a sort of semi-expensive guitar at home.
A semi-expensive? Is that like a semi-acoustic? I know. I never learned an instrument, and it's to my eternal regret. Maybe that's what my 50s will be for.
So I actually wanted to be on stage. I wanted to do musical theatre.
Two music kind of people.
He could have written about you.
Yeah.
There we go. But actually, that's probably one of my biggest regrets, that I didn't ever do that. Maybe I'll do that in my 40s, but who knows? I then studied geography at university, so I remember my mum said I was going to be a weather girl. And geography has nothing to do with what I do now. But I think my performance side has helped me to be a good leader and to speak to clients, to pitch in a room. So geography has nothing to do with it, but there we go.
Insert joke about understanding the landscape.
Yeah, I like that.
That's true. Yeah. So James, you've had a very, extensive career in strategy for brands. How has that kind of evolved over time?
Well, I suppose I just mentioned we weren't talking about landscape. I said the word landscape, but that's the bit that's...
How many times can we say the word landscape?
That's the bit that's when I think about that question, that's what I sort of look back. If I look back sort of 20 years ago, and with apologies for sounding like, it were all fields around here when I were a lad type person, but there are far fewer channels. So there's a few massive shifts, there's sort of the explosion in clearly in digital and particularly social media and how that's evolved since the first early days of sort of, buying Facebook ads or, building a MySpace page or what have you. I think there's the linear versus on-demand kind of thing. So media, less brand focused, but more media stuff, going from channels that were scheduled, everything curated for you, to being everything available all the time is just a massive, sort of paradigm shift and the thing that follows that, of course, is all the data that there is available to help make sharper, better decisions. And I think the thing that's underpinning all of that, if I think about it, really is about attention. It was always about attention, grabbing and keeping attention of your audiences. That's just both, there are more options as ways to do that now, but it's harder than ever to do because we are in so many different places and continuous partial attention onto lots of different platforms. So from a media and comms planning perspective, if I think about bringing brands to life in that context, it's a completely different world.
Hasn't this made your job like a billion times harder?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you not long for the days where it was like, we'll do A, B, or C?
Well, yeah, harder, but also more interesting, I think.
Right.
I think that, that there are far more potential wrong answers, which is both good and bad. So it means you have to work extra hard to get the answer that is the most right or the least wrong for the situation you're facing.
Right.
And sometimes that's, all sorts of things, client preference and whatever. But it means that, and budgets are never going to be enough to do it anyway. So it's always been a job of prioritization. But of course, that's what strategy is. It's about doing what you can with what you've got where you are now. That's true in life, and it's true in brand strategy, mostly the media strategy. So yeah, harder but more interesting, I would say.
We could get some life advice. I need to remember that. We need to ask you some life advice questions at the end.
Please,
okay,
yes,
yeah.
please do.
And Hannah, you obviously, like you said, you joined GOAT when it was 30 people. You were an intern or an exec at that time. Yeah. So how have you seen influencer marketing change since you joined? I know that's probably a huge question again as well.
Yeah. Well, when I joined, honestly, I remember my first day not understanding what on earth I was doing and what influencer really was. It was a new, big, shiny thing, and people didn't really understand the extent to which it could evolve. And I think we were learning every single day about what was new, how we could reach audiences, what type of creators were out there. And, every day it changed and evolved. But I think the biggest shift has been that influencer is now always, well, in most cases, integrated into a wider marketing mix. It isn't an afterthought. And I think probably, even 3-4 years ago, I still think it was an afterthought. But now it's at the forefront, and we're understanding that we can use influencers to reach the right people and to talk about the right messages. And I think brands don't start and then think, we need to think about influencers. It's integrated into their strategy from the beginning.
Yeah. Do you think that as well, James? Are you finding that it's a much bigger piece of the puzzle when it comes to a strategy?
Yeah, the creator economy has clearly grown enormously. So the options are greater and more diverse, and not only in breadth, but I suppose in sort of scale as well. So from nano and micro influencers all the way up to the top. I think it's, so I think whenever an economy like that sort of grows and it kind of codifies, some of the rules around it are codified, aren't they? So, how you buy, how you measure, those sort of things are starting to grow up around the opportunity as it becomes more grown up, I suppose. I think even this year, I think agencies are starting to, I think the IPA are running something, aren't they, to sort of look at measurement of...
We just had a chat about that with Dominic Charles.
Oh, of course, yeah. So Dom is involved in that, and Dom is exactly the right person to be involved in that. So smart people from across the industry thinking about how you measure influencers. I'm starting to think, by the way, that we should really agree on creators or influencers.
I know.
I also think influencer, there is this ongoing debate of like, what is an influencer, what is a creator? I think I always think that influencer is quite hard to define, because that also includes, to me, Travis Kelce, Beyonce, like they influence people, but they're celebrities. Whereas I think a creator is someone, for me, that's more started their career by creating content online. And that's kind of the origin, rather than them being a musician. But it is murky. Hannah, what do you think? Because we work with all different types of people in that space. And
it's interesting, because clients will always ask us, what's the difference between a celebrity versus a macro influencer? And that the lines can be really blurred. But for me, Joe, I think it's actually Beyonce for me isn't an influencer. She's a celebrity who is not reachable. So if I see her post something online, I never think, oh wow, I could do that, or I could have that, you know. Whereas if an influencer or creator posts something who I've followed for a long time, they're really relatable, they've grown their career online, and I've seen them do that, I feel like I can reach that, I can do that, I can be like them. So I think that's the difference in influencer / creator and celebrity.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Attainability, relatability, all of those things.
Yeah, it feels like a mix of aspiration and relatability is what you're talking about. When you're talking about setting, I think along with your definition of that, they actually make stuff. They've actually got a sort of talent for capturing a story, earning an audience, building an audience on their own part, rather than having achieved something in their lives and then people listen to them.
Yeah, well, we've actually spoken about that at Goat, of the balance of aspiration and attainability as well, where an ideal creator or influencer you want to partner with has some element where people aspire to be like them a little bit, because why would you buy something from, you know, that's recommended from someone if you didn't respect them or have some kind of aspiration to be a bit like them? But they still have to be kind of relatable, like you say, where I think if a Beyonce promotes something, like you say, it's almost so far above you that it feels out of reach in a way.
I mean, in some ways, it's nothing new, because brands have always wanted endorsement.
Yeah.
And endorsement goes a long way if it's the right sort of person. I'm a David Bowie, massive David Bowie fan. I was quite surprised to learn something I hadn't known about him, was that he did a Pepsi ad in the 80s, which I discovered recently. He re-recorded a version of Modern Love for it. And Tina Turner is in the video as well. Anyway, that's completely by the by. But the notion that you would always have paid people that you know people look up to be in your ads.
Yeah.
As a form of endorsement, even though it's kind of paid for, right?
Yeah.
So it's in a way, it's no different. And where I'm coming from as well, where government has always thought about influence in that way. So 2010, I think, something like that, when behavioural economics started kind of being talked about properly within our industry, the government produced a sort of mnemonic called Mindspace, which was all the different heuristics you could use in behavioural science, and the M stood for messenger. And the government has always known that sometimes it's better to use people that your audience listen to than say it yourself, particularly if you're government and no one wants to hear from you.
100%.
So so in a way, so that, we used to talk about influencers with a small lowercase I sort of 15 years ago, and it's really interesting to see that. So I think in some ways what's happened, it's the fusion of those things plus content creation plus distribution that comes from the internet, and then the way where you start to build the system around it that means you're able to buy that airtime.
God, it's confusing.
Yeah, this has made me think about, sorry, I think I'm jumping back, but we were just talking about celebrities. Beyonce, sorry to mention her again, but in one of her songs, she has the sentence Levi jeans, and I believe she's now
an ambassador for them,
on the TV ad. She's, Levi jeans, she turns around, it's Levi. But I'm not going to buy Levi jeans because she speaks about them, even though I find her, someone I look up to and would, aspire to be like, but I know I can't be like that. So if an influencer I follow posts about Levi jeans and tells me about the quality and the fit, I'm going to buy those jeans because I trust their voice.
Because it's word of mouth that's closer to being in the pub with your mates than it is seeing a billboard with a glossy ad that
Bowie in a Pepsi ad.
Yeah.
Pepsi ad.
And maybe there is an element of we know that kind of David Bowie or Beyonce have been paid an extortionate fee to be the face of that brand, whereas influencers or creators, we understand that they've been paid for that. I think that people get that nowadays, but there's still an element of us feeling like they use that product, whereas I don't necessarily believe that just because Beyonce's in a Pepsi ad that she drinks Pepsi. Especially when you then see her talking in a separate article about how she's like fully vegan and drinks only water, and so then I think there's like more expectation that the creators actually use those products. But going on to that, would you say there have been a lot of conversations, and we hear it thrown around all the time, that traditional media is dead, TV is dying? Is that something you agree with, James?
I think the advertising industry suffers from a severe case of wanting things to be dead and new things to be, king. Right? So I'm always a bit wary of pronouncing on things like that. TV is certainly changing, and I think it probably also depends on how you define it. So that whole thing I was saying before about linear versus on demand. I mean, me and my family, and I've got 3 teenage kids. Actually, only one of them's just gone away to university, so he's not around. But we will still sit around and watch stuff. We just have to spend half an hour deciding what it is first, and flicking between streaming services rather than going through on the EPG. Those sorts of changes, those structural changes, do bring huge sort of ramifications. Print is the same. So going back to when I started 20 years ago, you'd have had a TV plan. Couldn't we afford TV? Great. What do we do with print? Where are the posters? Bosh. Maybe some below the line, we used to call it. Whereas now everything's addressable. So TV can be narrowcast. A billboard can be bought in day parts. Radio can be extremely intimate, but also, audio can be one-on-one in a podcast situation. I don't know if you sell ads around this podcast, but maybe. No, sorry.
Sorry. Why have we thought about that?
So I think media channels are in a constant state of flux and evolving. I also think what constitutes media is changing. So if people, influencers, content creators are a form of media. So in some ways, the role that media serves is still the case. It just looks a bit unrecognisable to what it was. That's a non-answer.
Yeah.
But it's just trying to describe the nature of some of the shifts, I suppose, rather than trying to come down either side of a fence. I'm sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine. Would you agree, Hannah?
So I think, traditional media, I think it also comes down to demographic. I think, James, you just touched on, different people are going to consume...
How old I am.
Different people are going to consume different forms of media, depending on their age, depending on their interests. And... my dad, he'll buy the paper every week and he'll read that at the weekend, and that's something he really enjoys doing, and he'll learn from reading that paper. Whereas for me, I'll listen to the radio every day, and that's more of a traditional form of media. I put it on every morning and I listen to the news on the radio, or just any songs or new music that are coming on. But I think now things like point of sale in store, they're always connected back to, or should be, in my opinion, to the faces that they're using across their other marketing channels. So I think this is where influence everywhere comes into play. But, if you're watching a creator or influencer talk about a product and then you see them in store on the point of sale, you're probably going to buy that product because you've seen it online first and then you see them in store. So I think it's all connected. It's not dying, but it should take into account and not get left behind. It should take into account how to utilise influencers or creators as part of that marketing mix, I think.
Yeah. Matt, you're a 30-something-year-old man.
30-something?
30-something-year-old man.
Yes.
What are your consumption habits?
I just don't understand how linear TV is a thing.
Do you think no one watches linear TV?
Gone.
What about, when EastEnders is on at 8 p.m, I think a lot of people are sitting down and watching it.
I don't think it will exist.
I agree. I don't watch live linear TV.
Do you watch YouTube then, primarily?
YouTube or Netflix or, any of those.
I think, though, that you've got an interesting hybrid happening now where, obviously Netflix, when it first came out, did this incredibly innovative and disruptive thing of just dumping all episodes of...
The Binge.
Yeah, The Binge. But what was the series that did it? The one with the president? No, the president guy, the Kevin Spacey, House of Cards.
Thank you.
So it was one of the first sort of dump all the episodes in one go and you can watch it.
And that was so revolutionary.
And it was totally really disruptive. But then now you sort of get a situation where...
Summer I Turned Pretty, the latest teen show.
Right.
And it's huge, and a big reason that a lot of people are saying they think it's also taken off is because they've gone back to weekly episodes.
The weekly release. So the White Lotus will be each week.
Only Murders I'm into.
Only Murders is then sort of smaller bits. So I think I remember a couple of years ago Spotify talking about that they're going to go into live podcasting, and you think you've invented radio. So I think there is a big thing here where the people that pronounce linear TV dead, a bit like Uber probably pronounced taxi services dead. You come in, undercut, win the market share, and then raise your prices. And I think, the Netflix and the Spotifys have done something similar with linear media and realised the value of appointments to view, anticipation, scheduling. Maybe we don't get back to the world where it's Radio Times and me seeing what's on which channel, because that becomes impossible to represent on a double page spread. But I think the episodic release feels like a signal that there will be some element of that for some time. Curating your own feed all the time for everything is exhausting.
Yeah.
I totally think that's true. But could you imagine a world in the near future where sort of that very programmed watching pattern comes back, but the people that are the kids don't realise that was just like what linear TV was.
Yeah.
So we're going to recycle old habits.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's interesting.
At Christmas, my in-laws came around for Christmas and were totally lost without the EPG, without going down the channel or just going down the channels once because we don't have live TV.
Yeah.
And they were completely lost. But if you had that for the kids, they would never go near it because why would I just think about what I want to watch?
They just choose the app they want and then...
I do think it's interesting though what you said of it's exhausting curating your own feed all the time. We actually, one of our US strategists wrote a Substack recently. It was called Do I Miss Cable? And it was basically all about how decision fatigue is almost taking over and like you sometimes go on these Netflix and Amazon Prime and you just feel this sense of overwhelm of like there's so many shows to watch and I can't, there's so many new albums and I should listen to the new Olivia Dean album because everyone's talking about it but I don't have time, and there's something people are maybe like craving going back to just being given things to watch again.
Well, also, with you mentioned music, I tried to explain this to my kids and they don't get it. I mean, their taste is extraordinary for their age because they've got everything available to them. And I tried to say that, but the albums that I loved when I was their age, I really loved because I had about 10 of them.
And you still remember every word.
And there's something about having invested money and then therefore you invest time and therefore they become part of you in a way that this sort of surface level consumption of stuff doesn't allow you to do.
So its limitation is a benefit.
Limitation is a benefit, and I think the other thing that I've noticed, maybe this again me being grumpy old man, is that we live in quite a self-service world. So if I'm at the airline check-in, I have to do myself. The supermarket checkout, I have to do myself, and the kind of cognitive load of where do I queue and do I do this, and now I've got to wait for someone to sign my wine through and blah blah blah.
What do you drink?
I'm nothing at the moment. I'm dry at the moment, but that said, I still have to get my non-alcoholic lager signed off by someone, which strikes me as odd. Anyway, but there's a big thing in here about the way that brands and services, I think, are putting a lot, as well as the choice thing being overwhelming, choice paralysis. A lot of the effort is put onto consumers to do things for themselves as well, and I think there is another world possible and coming where brands that provide the service that make things easy that don't put that cognitive load and effort back onto people will become a bit more valued and maybe people would prefer to pay a bit more for them. I don't mean that sort of VIP lane stuff or anything, but in a supermarket, in a Sainsbury's local, but that kind of the tendency has been towards putting the onus on the customer.
That's maybe why TikTok has also been so popular, because it's just an app where you go on it and you just get served stuff. You're not really making decisions in the way that, and the way that people even follow creators on TikTok. Like you don't really ever go to a creator's page on TikTok, do you?
I don't think I follow many people.
No, and you don't really, you just kind of go on and scroll, and maybe that's an element of a decision fatigue as well, that as well as it having that addictive quality, but it's curated but still just served to you where you're not having to do any work in a way. Which is interesting.
I think on TV, like there's nothing better at Christmas time when there's a film on TV. There's something about a film being live on TV. Not live.
What is it?
There's
it's like Elf's on for the 15th time and you're like,
or The Holiday, I'm like, it's on at 7, I need to be on the sofa watching it. I don't want to pause it, I just want to watch it whilst it's on TV. What is that?
We want to regress.
It's regressing to childhood, I think.
Well, I also think I've often said as well that even songs you love sound better on the radio. Because there's something in the serendipity.
It's unexpected.
It's partly the unexpected and serendipity of it. It's also, there's a bit of me represented on this thing that isn't me. I think but underneath all of that is the idea that lots of other people are hearing it at the same time too.
The shared cultural experience.
And I think we can't underestimate that. And I think there's a big part of what goes missing with addressability and choice and on demand and all that sort of stuff from media, which is from a brand advertiser point of view, it's harder to get those everybody at once, but it's also hard to transmit what a brand really is on a one-to-one basis and really build up understanding. Brands thrive on shared meaning. I want to drive a BMW because I don't particularly, but you know what I mean. If a BMW matters to me because I know that everyone else knows what a BMW stands for.
That's so true.
It's all relative, and it only really counts if there is an impressiveness. But that's one way of looking at it. But also, it's the meaning can take many different forms.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there might be value, it might be supermarket value, it might be kind of the timing of something. There might be, you know, when you're in a World Cup season, everybody know, you know, there's the audience beyond the audience that you buy when you buy broadcast media. They call it wastage these days in media, but wastage can be incredibly helpful and constructive because it creates the base of understanding that means people who choose you stand out and feel they stand out. And you don't build that one display ad at a time.
No.
Really.
So how do you build that prestige in today's world where there is this fragmented audience?
The thing of all this addressability and on-demand stuff is that, and social media particularly as well, and I'm not a TikTok user, so tell me if I've got this wrong, but everything feels very fleeting. And I think
that's lovely as well. It's just like, it's gone.
And so nothing. And
I enjoyed that, but I can't remember what it was.
And nothing matters, and that's great. I mean, that's not good for your mental health if, say, that's politics, for example, because it's one crisis after another. It also means that from an advertiser point of view, you're constantly trying to make decisions about whether you should jump on this fleeting thing or that fleeting thing, and what are your fleeting things? What are my criteria for the fleeting moments that I want
what's
to
the trend of the moment?
Right, and it still makes me smile that there are such things as TikTok trends, that because they're all happening to me within this closed world that I don't go into, and then they've gone by the time you know, and occasionally, I don't know, a Pink Pantheress might make it through to my consciousness, and I go, oh, okay, there's a person making music based on drum and bass I used to listen to in the 90s. It's almost like our collective attention has gone to trying to make the most of these things that we've got no control over and don't matter anyway. Whereas I think there's something, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. I'm not saying, you know, they're great diverting things, and that's culture, and that's life, and that's connection. That's all really important stuff. I think the thing on the other side of all of that is the communities that exist online, and where people really do come together and bond together for connection and shared meaning and appreciation of whether that's music or other forms of culture or whatever it might be. I went to see Barack Obama speak at the O2 last week.
Oh,
I really wanted to go to that.
The really interesting thing he said, because he was talking about social media, and he was, like me, doing a wistful, you know, harking back to yesteryear, talked about using MySpace and Meetup for when he was in his first run for president. And Meetup was this thing where you know, it's very locally based and all about getting people to literally meet up in person. And he said there was something very powerful and potent about a social media tool or platform that was a tool to allow real world connection.
I actually used that within the last few years.
Right,
in
okay.
the country.
Yeah.
And I used Meetup, and I met new friends.
Right.
And it was like a bang, bang, bang.
Yeah.
There's your real world effect.
There's your real world. So as a way into a new real world that you've made your way into, and we can't all use Meetup now, but I think those little niche communities of interest, the stuff where things are lasting, not just, they might be small, but they're lasting. And brands finding a way to get a foothold in those places. And they might still be on TikTok. They might be in other places. The platform is not the thing. The community of people that are gathered around it is the thing. And I think if marketing or branding can sort of rediscover that obsession with being useful to people in the places where they are, as opposed to sort of jumping on a thing that is a fleeting bit of attention, I think we might go a long way to getting to the other side and being a bit more sort of audience beyond the audience.
Yeah.
I think the example you gave about the BMW, it's similar to trends online. Brands will try and jump on a trend, but if they're not quick enough, or if it doesn't feel authentic enough, then it's too late. You've not captured the audience's attention because you've tried to do something that you thought was cool and popular, but you've not done it in the right way or with the right tone of voice. So I think there's that trend element connects to what you were saying.
And are influencers then, is that a powerful tool, would you say, for entering these communities like you were talking about?
I think so. I think because there are so many communities online, when you follow someone who you feel is in that community, you feel part of it and you feel perhaps listened to because the things they're talking about are things that you're interested in or things that you believe in. So you trust their opinion, or you trust if they're using something, a new product or wearing a new item of clothing, you trust them. So I think being part of a community that feels like you are like that person is really powerful, and I think that's how influencers, creators can can do that for brands.
How can brands today then, how do they navigate that they have to sort of be everywhere to some extent all the time and still have a consistent brand message or brand kind of narrative? Or is that not even that important anymore, would you say?
I think consistency has always been important. Conveying what it is that you stand for and why. I don't mean stand for in terms of, sort of social justice or, green issues, or I just mean like, what you represent, what your brand sort of is shorthand for.
Yeah, like what you think of when you think of Pepsi.
Exactly.
What it is that
and I now think
mind.
of both Beyonce and David Bowie. So that's that. So consistency has always been important, and there's lots of great theory that I don't need to rehearse here about, that from How Brands Grow, Byron Sharp's work, Ehrenberg Bass Institute, talking about the importance of branded assets that are familiar that you use to place. I think what's always been interesting for me with influencers, and I think what brands have sometimes struggled with, is that it's hard to retain that consistency, that visual language, when you then sort of give yourself over to a content creator who has their own visual language and and it's not an advertising space. What it suggests is that there is a form of consistency that isn't just a logo, right? There is a form of consistency that is a sort of brand behavior that you then expect, you would hope or trust that people will put together on some subliminal level, because it's more than just a message. You have to be really clear on your message and really drive that home, but it's the body language of the brand, and that's always been the case. I think it's what media and comms planning is based on, that you can convey something about what you're trying to say through the way in which you do it, the way in which you behave in those channels. So there's one thing if I'm an advertiser on a TV station, it says something else if I'm a sponsor of a TV show, it says something different if I'm integrated into that show as product placement, or maybe if I've made my own TV show, right? So that's all just TV. There's different forms of body language, and all of them have a different way of expressing something about the brand. So I think it's brand behavior for me has always been the thing that gives me a sort of sense of cohesion to the things that might look different across the plan. All social media has always invited that challenge of brands. How do you have consistency while being native and therefore authentic? Yeah. And I think that's the ongoing battle. There's no one single right answer for that.
It's incredibly tough, I think. Yeah. And would you say, Hannah, we've worked with at Goat, some brands for long periods of time as well, like Nivea and Dell. So we've sort of had experience of working with brands where we're maybe doing short-term activations and, campaigns around Christmas, campaigns around Black Friday. They've released a new product, but then we've also been working with them on kind of a longer term driving relevance for that brand. Like, how do you do that with influencer?
Yeah, well, I think that ties into the consistency point we were just talking about, because you need to be consistent as a brand, but you also need to be consistent in the way that you show up when you use influencers. Because if you're working on a long-term partnership, for example, you'd probably be working with ambassadors who would create that kind of journey over time with a brand, and perhaps it's using different products over the year that are relative to seasonal moments, for example, with Nivea. But your audience and their audience can see through you if you're not being authentic, if you're not being consistent. So I think the consistency piece with influencers is, if you're using a creator on Nivea and then 2 months later she's posting about CeraVe, well, the audience is straight away going to be in the comments, negative sentiment about that creator who was using a different product 2 months ago. So I think actually for brands, it's really hard to maintain that authentic voice through the way that they strategize across lots of different channels, but they have to have a red thread of, consistent messaging. And that's why it's so important when we are given a brief that we understand what brands are doing on other channels, so that we can be integrated, so influencer or creators can be integrated into the wider picture. So perhaps the thing that they're saying isn't, verbatim, but it's still similar, but from their point of view.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I would love to come on to talking about government communications, because that's kind of one of the main reasons we invited you on. Matt looks very excited.
Sorry, it's such a strange thing to be talking about. But are you allowed?
I can't talk about too much necessarily that's sort of live at the moment. As you know, there might be some sensitives. I do not know
just
the nuclear codes. Just to stress,
Matt, in case you didn't read the brief, we're not talking about the actual government policies, but just what communication strategies are doing with the government. Maybe after, over a drink, we can talk. What do you think the biggest biggest challenges are for governmental organisations in engaging people nowadays, especially young people?
Yeah, I mean, trust is the first and obvious one. That is one of the main reasons I think you sort of call upon influencers and content creators. I mentioned earlier on that the government's always been quite sophisticated in its use of different messengers. And that's, if you're talking about health messages, you would absolutely use the NHS, or you'd use celebrity doctors, and you'd go on This Morning, or if you're talking about recruiting for the army, you might use people who've been through that process and come from the place that your target market come from, background as well as geography, that sort of thing. So, equally, we talk about community influencers as well on government. So the local imam, or the person who runs the running club, or brilliant example in the States from the 80s about using hairdressers, owners of hair salons and hairdressers that service the gay community to encourage conversations about HIV and the AIDS crisis that was happening. So you're finding these sort of inflection points that often are embodied in people, in individuals. That's what I think is fascinating about influencers. But I think more broadly, when you're looking in the media industrial influence complex that we're living in, and how government engages in that, trust is paramount. So there's an awful lot of vetting, an awful lot of looking at the available options, and increasingly that's getting more sophisticated, and it's understanding the communities that are built up around those influencers and those content creators, understanding the themes and the topics of interest. And back to my other point that I made earlier about the data that's kind of coming, all of that informed by data that makes it. So that's the first big thing. I think the second big thing that they're looking for is a sense of partnership. Government's also always been very good at knowing they can't do all this on their own. And I think the third thing is, you might call it effectiveness, you might call it outcomes, you might call it evidence that it works. That's the case for all advertisers, but the one thing you can never lose sight of working with government is it's public money being spent. So it cannot be frivolous, it cannot be ineffectual or ineffective. It has to be justified. So, every investment decision, and I know this is the case in commercial brands as well, but back to my first point about trust, the quickest way for a government to lose trust more is to sort of be seen to be spending money on the things they shouldn't be spending money on.
Yeah. On that trust point, Matt, I think I showed you that book I was reading, How AI Will Change Your Life.
Yep.
And I think it said in there that 60% of adults, I don't know if this is definitely correct, but we can check.
It's in the book.
60% of adults trust, an influencer or creator online more than they would a brand telling them something. So I guess this is similar to the government. If they're posting from their own social page, that's not how I educate myself about, current affairs. I will listen to an influencer online who I trust to tell me about their opinion, and that's probably how I form my opinion. So I think the trust piece is so important, and I think government organisations, although it's maybe risky in some areas to use real people, because yes, there is an element of briefing, there's an element of feeling scripted potentially, because there are things that governments can and can't say. So when they use an influencer, they still have to be given a brief. They can talk about things they believe in, but they should land the message that the government wants them to talk about. But I think governments will only get it right if they use creators who already talk about their political views online. So I follow this influencer called M. Clarkson, and she is very open online about her views, and she's someone who you listen to and you trust her because she's very well educated, she speaks very well. She already does that in her spare time authentically online. So if a government party worked with her to then speak about their goals or their aims, I would trust that because she's already spoken about politics on her page. Whereas if a government organisation uses a creator who has never ever said anything about politics online, I think
it might seem a bit strange.
Exactly,
yeah.
Because the point about paying someone, you're still paying them to talk about it.
Yeah.
So if you pay someone who's never once given their view, you think, oh, something's a bit off there. So I think there's a bit of a risk, but also there's a reward, because you're reaching people who are potentially younger online, different demographics that you can't always reach through other forms of marketing. But I think there's a fine line between how you show up with creators.
It's shadowy cabal versus like another human I can see. And you can understand one person better than
another human I can see, I think, works on some sort of subliminal level about accountability. Certainly in the case of a bank. Like, I've said this to this person, I now can say I said it to this person.
You take their name.
Yeah, exactly. But I think there's something about the connection one feels with another individual, another human being, as opposed to an institution and a set of rules or a statement or something. I think it's just it's.
And what kind of content are you kind of making with creators?
I think it's what fits best with the brief. So, entertaining or humorous isn't always going to be appropriate. Like if you're talking about health issues, for example, if you're talking about, checking for blood in your poo because that's a cancer sign. So there are certain things where a tone should be struck, of course. But there are other areas that where there's a bit more license. I don't think government-led work is necessarily ever going to be, pot noodle or, I'm trying to think now brands that do humorous stuff, and I can't. But you know what I mean. So I think
it's not going to be Duolingo with the owl.
It's back to, yeah, exactly. They're not going to be doing Ryanair tone of voice stuff on their social channels.
If you're speaking to young people as the government, you are allowed certain license to be tongue in cheek, to be irreverent, to be XYZ.
Right, exactly. So there are brilliant examples of the chatbot that got made, or the kind of AI tool that follows you all the way through your process if you're applying to join the army or the navy. So if that needs to be sort of informed by language, it needs to be non-jargon, so I think it's all those finer details of the user experience that meet people where they are. Sometimes that's about geographical where they are, sometimes it's a linguistic one, and you just have to be really mindful of what that is.
And I think people forget, when it comes to the government, when they think of government advertising, I think they often think, oh, that means a political party trying to kind of push their agenda, but actually there's huge amounts, a range of things. So it will be the Department of Education trying to educate people about where they can access skills. It will be health services, kind of it's a huge variety where creators could be used. Absolutely.
And Words is very briefly saying, yes, it's recruitment. So lots of our public services require advertising for them to work, to have enough soldiers, enough teachers, enough nurses, so that's an enormous thing. There's behaviour change pieces as well, which encourages us all to live healthier lives, or whatever it might be. There are road safety campaigns, there are public information campaigns. So all the kind of COVID stuff from 5 years ago, that kind of machinery of government that was able to get very quickly to information that told you what to do, what not to do, and it wasn't all just on that platform. 5 o'clock briefings, it was going out in media en masse, and it was going out through lots of other kind of voices and influencers as well, trying to reach people who are not necessarily consuming those mainstream media. So they're actually very, very smart, thinking about communities of colour, deprived communities, towns and cities that are feeling a bit sort of left behind and feeling very cynical. So government works very hard to reach those audiences. It's not just push it out and hope for the best. So all of this stuff that you're talking about is happening across quite a range of different challenges that are really important to society, functioning well. Yeah,
and you both mentioned about the importance, especially with government, for it to be measurable, for you to be able to have tangible impact. So how do you measure that for the government, but also, Hannah, specifically for just influencer in general? I know it's as with all advertising, there is no one answer.
There's no one answer, and it goes beyond awareness. Let's put it that way. Very, very focused on changing of attitudes and changing of behaviour. And there's a very rigorous evaluation community around government work, and you've heard from one of them today already, Dom. on a previous episode, that allows for effective measurement of everything that government does in comms, that builds that into a sort of database that means that it can be built upon, that means it's sort of cumulative as well. Dom's old boss, in fact, once said to me, evaluation is like justice. It's not just about being done, it needs to be seen to be done, right? You need to sort of be seeing it being done so you can believe in it and you can buy in the conclusions that are coming from it so that people can then act on those conclusions. People you'll never meet, but across all government.
Yeah, I think, Joe, we've spoken about this a lot, but there's always that misconception that influencer as a channel isn't very measurable, but I think that's totally untrue. I think, whether you want to look at vanity metrics or whether you want to look at the hard, more meaningful metrics, influencer as a channel, you absolutely can do that. And I think the changing perception is something you can do through the use of influencers, changing the tone of the conversation, the type of sentiment. So although that is, I guess, not as measurable as an engagement or a click, I think if you're talking about government incentives, for example, you could change the conversation through the use of influencers, and you can see that evolving across different channels.
Have any of you guys, can you think of a way you've been influenced by creators or influencers regarding some kind of government policy? I definitely, for me, can remember during lockdown being influenced by... I can't think specifically which ones, but I remember seeing a lot on TikTok of influencers talking about, COVID restrictions or like the importance of washing, just stupid things like washing your hands and things like that.
Yeah. I don't think I'd washed my hands before COVID.
Maybe like the travel aspect when COVID was...
Or like how to... I remember there were a lot of campaigns around getting creators to go get their vaccine and go do their tests. And it would be like, do your 15-minute COVID test and then do your makeup in 15 minutes in between, and just kind of it seems like a small thing, but I can remember that for me more than I can remember TV ads kind of talking about it, and maybe that's just because that's the platform I was using a lot of at the time. So
I don't know if this is linked to government, but if an influencer tells you to go and get your smear test done, you will do it because you see them talk about that, and you think, oh, I need to remember to do that. Whereas I don't think I would receive any other form of
that's
reminder.
A really good one, and I think I see a lot of creators going and they go do the test and they take you, they talk you through it to make you be like, oh, it's really not a big deal. It gets rid of the scared.
I mean, that's the brilliant thing about what content creators can do, I think, that I always talk about, which is that they can model the behaviour that you're trying to enact amongst other people. They can literally show you in the same...
Eat healthy. It's like,
right, here's a recipe. In the same way that, TikTok search is massively up because people are getting a direct experience of what this thing is going to be like rather than just being told and having to infer it from a Google result. Yeah. You can also do, that's what influencers can do proactively back in the other direction and just sort of model for you what you want people to be doing. Currently working on something for, the Department for Transport is looking at how to sort of promote electric vehicles, as you would imagine, as we work towards net zero and the phasing out of sort of internal combustion engines being sold in new cars. How do you get people to sort of, given all the debate about whether they're worth it, find the people who, the most influential people are people who've made the switch. Yeah. And they can show you what they went through, and you can dramatize that. It's fantastic. I think that the next big thing I think is going to be that, as government and individuals within government, you see politicians doing it more now, pieces to camera, using their platform in a way that they sort of caught the bug of what content creators do, whether that's Ed Davey doing stuff, or the best example is probably, my favourite example of recent months is Zoran Mamdani. If you've seen him, is the New York candidate for mayor for the Democratic Party, and his sort of use of video on across platforms, his way of natively getting into what people expect to see in the formats that people are familiar with, absolutely sensational. And there's also an idea at the heart of it, which is, here's this guide, your New York City guide to an affordability crisis. Yeah. And he's going to go around and report on it. And what I love about that is that there's an idea at the heart of it. It's not just handing over your brand to a creator to say, talk about this. Yeah. There is actually a creative idea at the heart of it. What if this person adopted this persona?
Yeah.
and he's gone and done it for himself. It's really, really good. So I'd urge people to go and look for his
cool.
stuff.
Yeah.
This makes me think, I know it's completely different, but you know, you had Millie G on the podcast and she spoke about her salt brand. I don't know if you know Salt. It's an electrolyte brand.
It's very new, but they've it's an influencer founded brand. So she was a creator before,
right,
and she started this electrolytes brand, and it's become really successful because they basically documented everything for her building the brand, so that by the time the brand got released, people had already almost followed her journey
without realizing you're already consuming her saying, I can't find a good enough electrolyte that doesn't have this much sugar or salt or whatever. And now she's got her brand and people love it because she's constantly been like teasing it all along the way. So it's fantastic.
It's what advertising has all done. Identify and dramatise the need, provide the solution. She's just done it over a matter of months and done it herself.
It's so clever.
Realising, I think as you both have been talking, and especially James, realising how your job feels very important and we shouldn't take any more of your time so you can get back to it. Thank you so much, Hannah and James, for joining us. Really interesting conversation, and I'm excited to see more of these government influencer communications coming out. So thank you very much.
We love the government.
Yay! My job here is done.